Hey everybody, welcome to We've Got Ward, a Doof Media podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of Parahumans. My name is Free Matman, and this is my coast... Oh, shit. Fuck. No, don't!
Matt, talk to me. What's going on, buddy?
I'm fine, I'm sorry. I just said the wrong word.
Hey, man, take 30 seconds, find your rhythm. You're the best podcaster in Cell 13, Matt. You have absolutely nothing to worry about. But if you screw up again, we'll literally turn you into a pig.
What?
Always remember, Matt, that this is the weekly podcast where you and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of extremely efficient bureaucracy, therapeutic hill slams, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. This week, we jump into an interlude with 13.x, followed by 13.9. First, it's time to visit the old Cauldron HQ to find out what our buddy Custodian has been up to. It's bad. It's bad stuff, Matt. It's bad. And then the Victoria Sveta and Tattletale use their words to save the life of a super old dude who makes people eat him. Parahumans is weird. Matt, what do you think about these two chapters?
Well, I absolutely adored the Overseer chapter. So many interesting things in terms of how it was done structurally. The character who we're introduced to there is so much more interesting than I would have ever guessed.
Yeah.
Like if you gave me my list of what characters haven't got interludes ever, but you want them to get one, I don't think Custodian would even be on the list. But
no, I don't even know if I remembered Custodian at all until this chapter.
Right. That would have been a mistake, though. And then, of course, we go back to the Victoria chapter. There's some excellent, basically just solid character interactions and intense kind of negotiation, which is a very fun and particular kind of thing that Wildbow is actually really good at. So we'll have plenty to talk about there too.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's going to be fun is kind of discussing how these two chapters play off each other, because they are chapters that are taking place almost literally during each other. And I think Wildbow has fun with that a little bit in how one informs what's going on in the other. I think you look at a decision was made to say the interlude is going to become before 13.9, and that decision means something. And I think looking into that will be fun. Yeah,
I think you're exactly right. All right. So announcement real quick.
Yeah. So just another reminder about the quarterly fan art contest that is going on right now. The theme is relationships. So whatever you want it to do, however you want to interpret that, related to Ward or Worm, just the world of Parahumans, entries are due by Monday, May 27th at midnight Pacific time there. So you can head on over to doofmedia.com for more details, or just click the link in the show notes. I know I've said that the past 2 weeks, and I forgot to put it in there, Matt. But I'm gonna do it for reals this time.
All right, and there are cash prizes. I know I try to mention that every time because it's a whole different order of fun, right?
Yeah, that is it is, and that all those cash prizes are so wonderfully provided by our patrons. They are the ones that allow us to put on this contest. So we thank them, and we really look forward to everything you guys got.
Yeah, it's really fun to see. All right, let's move on into 13.x. So, I've really over the years come to appreciate the interlude chapter puzzle as a kind of unique and fun thing about this story and about Worm too. I think to a greater extent in this story though. So, here we find ourselves in this dystopian, almost Terry Gilliamian office complex arranged in a decagon surrounded by very intense, aggressively can-do people. And we see that we're on the yellow book, and we don't know what that is, but it sounds serious.
Yeah. Gilliamian is my new favorite word.
Yeah, it probably should be like Gilliam-esque, but Gilliamian is so much more fun to say.
Yeah, I mean, when you're making up words, you do the ones that are more fun. So.
I agree.
I agree with you regarding the mystery of this. And this is one of those ones that really holds on to that mystery for, a fair amount into this chapter. We still don't really know who this is. And it's kind of this, like the structure of this chapter is really interesting because it kind of just with everything does this kind of slow zoom out where we start very small and insular. Like we start at this one decagon, as you said, and we have this one character who's observing the one worker there. And then we slowly kind of zoom out to see how much larger the scope of this whole thing is. And we zoom and zoom and zoom until we see the breadth of Teacher's empire. And it's this way of like starting off small and then becoming terrifying as we zoom out. I think it's great. It's a great way to do the mystery of who owns the chapter. It's a great way to really just get us into this oh shit mode. I really like it.
Yeah. And there's some interesting kind of misleading clues toward the beginning, which I think is a really interesting way of doing this. So like we've got the mysterious overseer. We don't know who this is. We don't know anything about them, watching over the workers. We don't even know who the POV really is at first. We're not told the overseer is the point of view, right? It's gradually becomes clear. But at first we assume this is like this overseer is some high level member of this organizational structure. But eventually small clues in the text seem to suggest that this person can't possibly have like a normal physical presence because of the things that she's doing. Here in particular, one of these misleading clues I was talking about, the overseer actually speaks toward the beginning of the chapter. But it's a red herring basically, because we find out later that no one can hear her when she speaks.
Yeah, but it's not cheating, right? Because like it's not just like Wildbow had the overseer speak here to trick us, because speaking, even though she can't be heard, is something that the overseer does regularly. It's part of her character. It's a key trait of hers. So this is a great way to kind of mislead you a little bit, but it is not breaking the rules of the character as have been established.
Yeah, and also, especially when you reread it and you see the fact that she's so like harsh and judgmental in the things that she's saying, it's very interesting because the people in the Decagon have kind of I don't know, they're trying to be team players and she's just being very like, you screwed up,
Yep. I mean, yeah, her cold nature towards these human beings is kind of slowly, like it starts off as just like, kind of a jerk boss. And then by the end of the chapter, again, we kind of zoom out to just how indifferent she is to them.
Yeah.
And it's like, holy shit. That's what I love about this chapter. And I mean, the cool thing here is you're absolutely right that we kind of quickly learned that they can't be in the physical space, but we don't start off that way, right? Like one of the first physical actions the overseer takes is looking over someone's shoulder while reaching out and helping to press and hold the pages of the yellow book flat. So this is something that anyone could do. I could be leaning over your shoulder, helping you open something while you're working, and not be like physically weird, right? But from there, we like immediately start to contradict that because, as you said, more people start showing up and suddenly we're losing grasp of the physical space and how people are oriented in the space because no one is approaching the overseer. No one is like shuffling by the overseer or looking towards her or saying anything to her. She does say something, but no one directly responds to that. And you're right that we're immediately like,
yeah,
that's weird.
Right. And also her perspective is so externally focused. Like at first, you feel like, we're watching, the dedicated but nervous Lori try to recover from this minor slip up she's made, and her her cell manager swoops in, tries to get her head back in the game, and then Lori is confessing that her level of stress is due to the feeling that she's going to be demoted to being a mindless drone, and you're like, oh, so Lori is the POV. No, that's just because the overseer isn't really thinking to herself much at this point in the chapter.
Yeah. I agree. And I this Lori stuff, I want to spend some time on this because I really, really like this. I like what Wildbow is doing with this and how this is kind of messing with our emotions a little bit here. Because so we've been talking about how a lot of this chapter is establishing the scope of things, the scope of teacher's operation, who Overseer is. Wildbow is using Lori here to perfectly establish this kind of competing tone of the chapter. There's like a tonal disconnect happening between some characters' actions and the things other people are saying. And that's present throughout this entire chapter. Like it opens with people telling them to get their yellow books out, and Lori does, and she's doing it as she struggles. And I love this idea of like, it says she was getting their book out to try to open it to the first section, but the book naturally closed because the rigidity of the paper and firmness of the spine. She typed with one hand while struggling with the other to maintain her place in the book. So like we're automatically starting with this like, get your books out, and this person is like so concerned about the books that they're like typing one-handed while holding a book open. I don't know if you've ever like tried to do that, Matt, but I have, because like when I'm prepping for the book club slides, oftentimes my book just doesn't want to freaking stay open. And it's like you're trying to hold the book. And I kind of do this thing where I like hold the book open with my elbows and like try to type at the same. And it's just awkward and terrible. So the fact that she's even succeeding at all here is like commendable because that's pretty tough to do. So we kind of establish her as this fairly competent person. And then in this moment, she fails and she immediately freaks out. She's like, no, don't, fuck, shit, I'm sorry. Yeah. And so we're immediately like, oh God. So wherever she is, people are so strict that one slip up and you're screwed. And even the name Overseer like comes into context here, where like she's freaking out and you realize, oh, the Overseer, like this is like overbearing and cruel. This is going to be terrible. But then the cell manager comes over, and the book has kind of trained us to think that this is going to be real bad. But then the cell manager comes over, and this is this incongruous tone here where they're just speaking in a calm voice. It's just like, just take 30 seconds, find your rhythm, collect yourself. The manager like gets a wet cloth and dabs Lori's forehead and is just like, and rubs her shoulder. And it's like, it's going to be okay. He's like, hey, we're about to do another shift change. Do you need to duck out early? The other guy can cover for you. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. And it's this moment of you're like, this is weird. This isn't matching up to what the character's actions aren't quite matching up. And I think what this does is kind of ratchets up the tension even more than it normally would be, because like you're this disconnect is going through your head and you're like, something's got to be real bad here. If she's feeling this way, but they're presenting in a different way, what the hell is going on here? And that's when she starts dropping words like dog and pig, like these animalistic dehumanizing labels. And then we start to realize the fully extent of what they're doing to these people.
Right. I think it works, like you said, really well that like, cell manager Miltona seems like a good person who's maybe been like sucked into working for teacher and is trying to kind of do his best, or her best, actually. Yeah, her. Yeah. Sorry. And it's impossible because the things that they're being asked to do are terrible, but she's trying to take care of Lori, and she's trying to avoid doing terrible things, and but the contrast that provides to the Overseer, I think is very effective here, because the Overseer couldn't give less of a shit about like how Lori is doing. Like she's just completely cool with replacing Lori with a more functioning part. In fact, she basically says as much later, like things that wore out could be replaced. And it's contrasting, Michael Scott type of boss with, and like an eldritch being sitting over Michael Scott's shoulder, telling him like, just destroy them. Yeah. It's an interesting contrast. So the Overseer then kind of moves on from this, kind of just like checking around more, checks in on Donna, who is apparently another, a thrall serving as a cryptography breaking oracle, and pretty much nothing else. She even needs her drool to be wiped away.
Yeah. And I mean, this is clever, right? Because like we just had Lori talk about the pigs, right? That this is, if I continue to mess up, this bad thing's going to happen to me. And then the book smartly pivots to one of those pigs. It pivots to Donna, who is this almost mindless drone. I love the writing here. There was no reaction, no change in Donna. The older woman breathed at a set rate, blinked at a set rate, and even seemingly filled the catheter bag attached to her chair at a set rate. Like, this is not a human being anymore. Like,
Yeah.
and I love that, because again, we're seeing Lori act a certain way. She's talking about a certain thing. We don't really understand it. And her manager is seemingly contradicting the claim that she's making. But then we just like kind of mosey on over to one of those exact people she was talking about, and we see the extent of the horror. And it's only after this horror is fully described to us that the book really starts to pull back, right? We've established this horror specifically with one employee, and then the chapter pulls back and the scope opens up. And the chapter starts to open up, really. And structurally, I just think it's so smart. It just pings you with the exact emotions you need.
Yeah, yeah. And it starts to be a lot more explicit about what's going on. I mean,
yeah.
What we already, you basically are already figured out. You may not have figured out that this is Custodian if maybe you haven't read Worm in a while, but you have already figured out that this is almost certainly Teacher Thrall's watching our heroes, because the text that they're transcribing is the meeting that's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
So the hive of teacher servants are kicking into gear as they track the detective's progress in solving the mystery and uncovering Teacher's role. One of the other cell managers is annoyed that this has happened and blames the writers of the diary, which is interesting and probably a fair accusation, since it seems like 100% of the other reputation bombs were subtle enough that even their targets weren't sure if they were real.
Yeah, I agree. It's like they just quite didn't sell it. Just not enough. So this is, Matt, this is our big mystery, right? This is the mystery that has propelled us through this entire arc. Is kind of being solved now. Or rather, the immediate Victoria part of the big mystery. Like, we don't know the full scope of what Teacher is planning and what they're doing, but we do know that this was the group that planted the diary. Yes, it's planted. She did not write it. No part of her wrote this. This was planted by someone else. And it was sniffed out. And perhaps specifically because it was at the bunker that Victoria first learned about it, the one place where they don't have eyes, is how she's kind of able to maneuver herself to the point where she gets in contact with Tattletale and starts to break down their attempts at stopping her.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that the text explicitly tells us the Teacher's group doesn't have eyes inside the bunker.
Yeah.
Because it's actually nice to establish something like that, when you have the opportunity to do so. Like, it's difficult to imagine how you would establish that in a Victoria chapter, because like, how is she going to know? But now we know, like, okay, the bunker is safe. As this conflict evolves forward in time, we can kind of count on, when are they able to talk privately, for example.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so I want to talk to you a bit about that decision, though. Like, structurally, this decision to solve, quote unquote, solve the case to the reader before the detectives, right? We have our two detectives. They're trying to solve the case, but the reader gets to find out about that first. And last week, Tattletale basically all but told us that it was Teacher behind this whole thing. So, like, if you get right down to it, I guess technically that is the case being solved. We don't know for sure, right? That's just her best working theory. But so they haven't solved the case yet. They think it's Teacher. They're not 100% sure yet. But the book solves it for us, the reader. We know for sure. Why do you think it was done this way? Like, what do you think? How do you think this? Just what's your opinion on how this, benefits the storytelling going forward?
I just think that the way this is going to have to evolve, you've got this very established threat that is basically the thing that they're going to find is behind all of this. Yeah. And it's going to come for them before they come for it, right? Like, this isn't the scene in Seven where they go to the guy's apartment and he sneaks out of the back or whatever. It's a massive organization. So they're not going to go knock on somebody's door. It's going to be an attack from Teacher. So you understanding what exactly is Teacher's objective here. What is the disposition of his assets at this point in time? I think it actually helps also in terms of dramatic irony that we know that he's got, we haven't talked about this yet, but we know that he's got fully powered up Veilfor, Mama Mathers, a handful of other powerful mercenaries and people that we hate. working with him, and Contessa in his pocket basically. Can't quite use her yet, but the text assures us that he will. All of this builds him up as a threat. Whereas if we didn't get this and it was just suddenly teacher is attacking, then it's just like, okay, I don't know where this is going. I don't really know what to feel about it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the other thing it does, and I think this kind of ties into what you were saying, is this to me signaled this idea that the mystery of who wrote the diary is not important anymore. That the book is basically telegraphing with that central thing, it doesn't matter anymore. Like it doesn't, we're moving on from that. Like we used that was a very effective narrative tool to get us into, to escalate us towards this teacher conflict. But we're here now. The detective story is kind of ending, and we're moving on to something else. And I think doing it in this order really helps accentuate that like it's telegraphing that the solving of the mystery is less important than the ongoing conspiracy.
Yeah, right. That was just the in to start unraveling the sweater.
Exactly. Yeah. And speaking of dramatic irony, I want to talk to you about this a little bit, because I do think the way this chapter structures itself allows it to do really fun, clever stuff with dramatic irony. Because we have to say, while all this is happening, chapter 13.9 is basically being played out in real time, right? Like we're only seeing snippets of it. We're seeing snippets through the conversation here and there that will allow us in retrospect to actually orient ourselves around the timing of these two chapters. We know when they're having this conversation in 13.9, this thing's going on in 13.x and the other way around as well. And what's cool about this is it allows us to see the cell managers and leaders discussing how they're going to stop Victoria and Tattletale from leaving with the old man. We get notes where they're talking about, okay, we got little Midas. There's a pawn downstairs that we could use as well. And it's fun because like in next chapter, we'll see getting old man out of there alive becomes the conflict point around which the second half of the chapter really turns. So we're seeing Team Teacher set this conflict up now, but we get to watch it pay off in the next chapter, knowing what we know about who's pulling the strings, who's actually controlling this. It kind of allows us to see what the subtle teacher influence looks like real time, in a way that you couldn't do it otherwise without establishing this first. And I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I like that too. That makes sense. So as the chapter moves on here, the Overseer comes more into focus as a character rather than just like a viewpoint. We begin to realize that we've been in the Overseer's perspective this whole time. But her, like we said, her perspective is often indistinguishable from a neutral vantage point because she just watches everything. And she needs to make an extra effort to interact. And, she speaks, but no one hears her. Instead, she has to convey her orders by manipulating metal dust on special purpose magnetic boards. But one thing we do immediately notice is it does appear that she has the authority to give orders. So even if we realize this is Custodian, that may be a surprise at this point. Yeah,
and I think that's one thing that we're going to focus on a lot. That name, right? That change to Overseer is important, and we'll circle back around to that again. But yeah, I mean, there is hierarchy here, and it appears that she's higher than just about any of the people we've seen so far, because she's ordering around the highest level we've seen.
Yeah.
I do love the detail of how the Overseer's like form is revealed here when she's manipulating the dust, because it's like 100 faces observing the dust particles as she manipulates them. 1,000 inverse statues filling a vast space, limbs entangled, hair touching shoulders and back, toes on shoulders, knees against the sides of heads all propped up against one another. It's like it's really cool writing. It's like not the thing, like this is not something that exists in real life. So it's always fun to see how this book, describes things that do not exist in kind of beautiful and haunting ways.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun trying to visualize this, even though it's technically invisible.
Yeah.
Just like conceptualize what this is and how it operates and what she's actually doing when she starts manipulating things. And another thing that the chapter, like we know that she can interact with matter, like, and move things around. Like she's not limited to tiny little, air movements. She can clearly lift things, right? So it's just interesting how the text isn't entirely clear on what her limits are and what her capabilities are. Like she's not just limited to surveillance; she can also move things. So
yeah,
I think we'll see that though.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, as she moves around through the Decagon. which we learn is one of many. And then she notes a couple of people breaking down as she goes, and she tidies things up as she moves along.
And it's like, this is one of these moments that like a good author can take such advantage of just showing you a couple different things to define character, because we have these moments where she's like just wandering through and like this guy's rubbing his arm against the table so hard it's bleeding, and then there's crumbs on the floor because they're feeding some of their people, and she treats both of these things as if it's the same chore, right? Like mopping up the blood from your employee that's having a mental breakdown and picking up crumbs from the floor and dust is essentially the same action. And it's just a perfect way to characterize how she feels about this whole thing without any, like, there's no dialogue here. There's no explicit like exposition about how Custodian feels about these people, but just through this simple, the mundanity of just, picking up, cleaning up, it's one is horrible, one is mundane, and they're both the same. I love it.
Yeah, I agree. She's later on, she'll have some fire and some anger in her, but as she's going through all of this, there's just this like serenity. Yeah. Like she almost enjoys the routine of it, even if it's something disturbing, like cleaning up someone's blood.
Yeah, I agree.
So she moves on to cell 1 to report in, and she passes through the hallways of what is evidently the Cauldron base, which, at this point, I think we had some clues that this was the case, but yeah, it's established. And we find out that Fortuna is here, having let down her guard and been captured by Teacher's people. Subsequent to this terrible revelation, she then stops in with the fella who snitched to Engel, tipped her off, and let her know that stuff is weird here. This guy has a very low opinion of Overseer, and I think this bit where he's just kind of ranting at her actually does a lot to does a lot of legwork in terms of setting our feelings toward Overseer.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is the point where, I mean, for me, the person who didn't think about Custodian a lot since we left her behind in the last book, this was the moment where I finally was like, oh, okay, this is the Custodian. Like, she's referring to the Cauldron HQ as home. She even calls Contessa home as well, her face. The text does not specifically use the word Custodian yet, but right. I think this is the point where the book is basically like letting you come to that conclusion.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I do think it is very important that it happens in this moment where this guy is asking her, why are you still here? You're not a slave to Cauldron anymore. You don't have to be here anymore. You don't have to pick up after these people do their work. And then we start to really define Custodian in a way we've never done before. She could always have left. They were powerless to stop her. She was always there by choice. And he calls it a ship of Theseus, and she says, it is not, because I am here. I am the constant. And it is in this way, this beautiful way, that the Overseer is basically declaring this place as Cauldron still, right? It might be run by new management. It's management with a different set of agendas, different methods to accomplish their agendas. But because of Overseer, because Custodian is still here, things are the same. She's rebuilding it. She calls it her creation. And it's like this, we're really starting to like hint towards the way she feels about the hierarchy that we've established so far.
Yeah, right. It's completely turns our impression of this character on its head. Like, if anything, I had like a mildly positive take on the Custodian.
Yeah, because she helped Taylor a little bit, right?
She helped Taylor a little bit. And like, when you think about it now, you're just like, well, she's really just trying to protect the Cauldron headquarters, the physical plant. Doesn't care about these people. Mm-hmm. So finally she makes her way to Teacher to give a summary of the current issues in the Decagon. And she thinks that line, what broke could be replaced, thinking about people here. Very much of a piece with the kind of attitude that she must have had back when they were doing all the Case 53 experiments.
Right.
Yep. So after Teacher gives powers to a new round of recruits, Scapegoat takes away the negative components of the power, as we're aware that he can do now. That's why everyone is kind of able to have free will, and that's why Lori is not just an automaton by default. Mm-hmm. And then the two that refuse to join him are handed off to a completely rehabilitated Valefor, who I'm sure is just going to engage them in cheerful small talk and then just like walk them back home.
Oh, you're definitely right. That is absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they said no. They offered him a choice. They said no. They're just going to let him go. It's going to be fine.
Yeah. Valefor just wants to stretch his legs. So he's the one who's escorting them and not someone else. So this cluster of Scapegoat, Valefor, and Teacher are what Overseer calls oversight. This master trump combo makes it all possible.
Don't you love that word oversight though?
Yeah.
Like the overseer names this trio oversight.
Yeah.
And like this is one of those things where we're having fun with words, right? Because there are two meanings of the word oversight. There is, the traditional one where it's just like the action of overseeing. And so the overseer is almost providing oversight, if you will, which is, again, I think shows where Custodian values herself in this hierarchy. She kind of almost sees herself as the one actually in charge here, right?
Yeah.
And of course the other meaning is a failure to notice something, like lacking oversight.
You had an oversight.
You had an oversight. Yes. And so, I mean, that's a fun little double meaning where you're like, you think that the book is having a lot of fun with the Custodian. Like this is her creation. She's the constant. She oversees and provides the oversight. And the question that comes to you really quickly is, who's actually in charge here?
Yeah. Yeah, right. And it does make me wonder, just in the vein of playing with words, like what is overseer overlooking? What is she missing, right? Because I feel like, I don't know, like my first thought is like she thinks she's in charge, but she always thinks she's in charge, but she's never actually driving decisions. She just wants her little kingdom to be sacrosanct, and she doesn't really care who lives there or what they do.
Yeah, I that is fun. Like I think the text does make it very clear that from her perspective, she's the one in charge. But I do think if we're paying attention, we see that that's not exactly the case. And that's kind of how Teacher operates, right? He makes you feel like you have complete control over yourself, over the things that you want. But it's all a game.
Yeah. Well, he does seem to have kind of sucked her into his vortex of fuckery, because she kind of like wants his approval, right?
Yeah.
You see a bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I enjoy this little detail as we're doing the brainwashing, that Teacher thinks he's being nice, letting the people retain their agency until they slip up.
Yeah, and that's a nice connection to that horrifying disconnect we saw earlier in the chapter, where like the managers were really nice. Even though like the thin veil of threat is there, it's always bullshit. Like the idea that, oh no, like there's no consequences as long as you're good, like you'll have a great life. And like it's the same kind of like bullshit mindset that slaveholders had, where it's like, oh, we're providing them food and shelter, and yeah, as long as they behave, everything will be fine and it'll be great. Like it's just absolute bullshit, you can tell, but he's just so smarmy about it.
Right.
Teacher.
I mean, to remove the tongue from the cheek, like Valefor clearly told those people, okay, you really want to work for Teacher, actually. So get back in there, and now they're going to be working there, and those are the people who were like, I thought it was 6 days a week or 5 days a week or whatever.
Right.
And he's like, if you don't like it, you can leave. And then what that really means is, if you don't like it, then we're going to brainwash you into liking it.
Yep.
And then you're going to join us, and then it's a perfect system. It's horrifying.
It's perfectly terrible. Yep. I agree.
I love it. So as Teacher's posse prepares to leave on an errand, we see that he's got some Fallen with him, including Mama Mathers, some Chait assholes, and Saint. Just a wonderful group of fan favorites.
Yeah, it's like the freaking asshole reunion 2019.
Yeah.
They should get t-shirts made or something.
They should.
Yeah, I mean, they are going. We learned that this whole organization is going over to Earthsea, and then Teacher wants Overseer there because it's home for her. So that's the beat we're heading towards, is her creation, how she came to be. And it's this terrible world that we've only kind of seen tangentially, but we're diving into a little bit more.
Yeah. So they pass through the portal, and as they pass through, the Overseer's power kind of flickers off, and there's just for a few seconds she turns back into her human non-breaker form. And I just love this bit here. Scared me, Ingenue murmured. Custodian? Overseer. Her own voice was rough, uneven. I just absolutely love the idea that like no one else has ever. I mean, this is I'm kind of making this up, right? But like, I love that no one else knows that she calls herself Overseer, and she's just like, I guess now that I have a body, I'm going to tell you that I'm overseer, so you'll stop calling me custodian. But she doesn't really care. Like I guess that's what I love about it. She doesn't really care what they call her. But now that she is here, she's bothering to correct them.
Oh, I think she does care what they call them. I think the fact that she's correcting them shows that she cares.
Yeah,
because she doesn't get to correct people very often, but this is the one chance she does get to correct people, and she's like, "I am not custodian. That is not who I am. I am overseer."
I think more closer to what I mean to say is that she doesn't bother trying to communicate much, hardly ever, right? Like she has the magnetic board she could use to talk to people. Okay, let me reframe it. You would think that she would be incredibly like lonely and isolated, right? But you would think that she would be like a case 53 where she's like feeling terribly like something was done to her that's wrong and she's a victim. That's not true at all. When she gets back her physical body going through the portal, she's not like, "Oh, my body, I've missed my body." She's just like, "Oh yeah, here's my body. I can't wait to get back to my awesome form where I fill space." So like she just the ingenue directly asks her here, and so she answers. But like I don't think custodian, overseer is the kind of person who's going to go out of her way to like take teacher aside later and be like, "I really would appreciate it if you would call me overseer." Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah, but I do think that name change says so much about her, right?
Yeah,
and about what she thinks of herself and her position in this whole thing, because like these words are essentially like by strict definition synonyms, right? Mm-hmm. Overseer and custodian mean the same thing, but custodian has another connotation. Custodian has the person hired to clean and maintain a building connotation, right? Mm-hmm. That is almost by context like, I don't want to say devaluing, because like it's like the people that clean buildings and stuff work really hard and they're important. Like I don't want to seem like I'm dismissing those type of people, but they are much lower on the hierarchical chain than the people at the top, right?
Yeah.
And so that the connotation of that word inherently devalues her because of that,
right?
And so the switch to overseer is indicative of her valuing herself at a much higher level than she has been before.
Yeah, I mean, I probably literally undervalued custodian as a factor, literally because her name is custodian.
Right. I mean, yeah. Like I think we joked about that fun name, and it's like, because she's like cleaning up the building.
Right.
That's clever. And like she's still doing that, which is the interesting thing. Like she is still definitely like cleaning and keeping the dust away and doing all these thousands upon things that need done. She's also like helping repair and improve stuff as she's going to.
Yeah.
I just think it's a very clever way of taking two words that essentially mean the same thing, but putting so much meaning in the fact that she has moved beyond the one and is embracing the other, embracing it to the point where if someone uses it towards her directly, she's going to say, "No, that's not me.
Yeah.
I am not the custodian of this place. I am the overseer."
Yeah. It even pushes you to consider the alternate meanings of custodian or the alternate context, like the custodian of a child has control over the child, has power over the child, right? You don't think of a building custodian as having power over the building, but the custodian of a child definitely has power over the child. And so it's just, it is a word that it can indicate a relationship of power, but our assumption was that it was indicating merely that she's the caretaker would almost be the conceptual synonym that we were assuming, but it's more like, provisional owner.
Do you think that custodian has a much more softer connotation than overseer as well?
I think it does.
It's a little more passive. Like you said, it's caretaking, it's guarding, it's protecting, whereas overseeing is like controlling, is omnipresent. And it's so funny that like she's doing the same things, with the same abilities, the same person, but the name changes so much meaning. And that's why I love it so much.
this kind of highlights a certain thing that's been going on, and I think we're going to see more of it actually in this next chapter, where everybody freaks out about this idea of the old man and what he can do. And Tattletale, because she can't help herself, makes a direct comparison to what Kinsey can do.
Yeah.
Which makes us realize, like, I wonder if the villains know what Kinsey can do, because it seems like if they did, they would want to kill her too.
Yeah, I mean they make a reference towards it after Tattletale brings it up in that chapter. So
yeah,
if they didn't, they're learning quickly.
Right. And here we have someone whose name is Overseer, which is exactly on that trend of just like people whose power is a kind of omnipresent watching eye. That's what she is, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely, I think it's, Wildbow does this thing frequently where a concept will resonate between characters and across an arc. And I feel like between these two chapters, we're seeing a little bit of that here.
Yeah, I agree.
So we move on, and the small group of Class A bastards arrives at a celebration in their honor hosted on Earthsea. Hundreds of people in the crowd look on Mama Mathers instantly losing the battle before it begins. The Overseer gives a badass monologue out loud, heard by no one else, as she expands to fill the area.
Can we talk about this monologue for a bit?
Yes.
It's so great. So we learn here that she was a person that was sold to Cauldron. She was sold and tested on, and the vial broke her into thousands of pieces, and it was an incredibly painful experience the first time it happened. And then she gives this villain monologue, this like horrible but wonderful villain monologue. You wanted me to be a housewife, and I am. I maintained my home. You wanted me to be meek, never heard, and I am. You wanted to be nothing and no one, and I am. I am a creator of my own kingdom. I am free. I am a woman more powerful than any of you. I'm everything you wanted, yet everything you feared, and I can be both because I am everything, everywhere. It's like we know Earthsea is this very like regressive backwater restricting rights type of world, and she has essentially become a god, the closest approximation to a god that exists. Right? She's omnipresent. She's everywhere. She can see everything. It's such a beautiful speech that like is simultaneously terrifying. Like part of me wants to be like, fuck yeah, like look at you, like your oppressors, like these people that oppressed and abused you and sold you away, like she says, bartered away for power. You will find now that you get what you pay for. And it's like this fuck yeah, but at the same time, no one can hear it. It's her talking to herself.
Yeah, right. It is an interesting kind of play on this concept of what the Judeo-Christian God is sometimes conceptualized as being like a watchful presence that can intercede in the world, but maybe sometimes doesn't. Mm-hmm. I think it's a great, play off of this idea that she comes from this, very, very bizarre yet still fundamentally Abrahamic world. They've used that word to describe it, right? There's a lot of similarities with what she has become and the Abrahamic God. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and like I said, like I don't like Earthsea. I think that's shitty. It sounds like a shitty place, and what they did to this girl was terrible. So yeah, and on one side I'm like fist pumping, fuck yeah. On the other side I'm like, oh shit, like this is not going to end well. And I love that, like the kind of when you're torn in two with that kind of stuff and you don't really know what to think. I think it's just really great.
Yeah. I before we move on from this, like this idea that the fallen leadership are just like welcomed with open arms by Earthsea is something that I feel like we should have seen coming, and may have even been telegraphed to us. But like this moment of Mama Mathers, walking out on the stage and curtsying for everyone, basically, you're just like, oh my god,
you're just like, oh fuck yeah, like the ease of which he just takes complete control of this entire universe, right? Like it's just the drop of it. It's not even hard. It's like, yes, come in. The tools of their own destruction. It's really great. Yeah, and terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
Oh yes, wonderful. Yep. So teacher also mentions having something mysterious on the top floor of his facility. So what's this? Like one of my first thoughts was like some fragment of Eden that remains, or maybe like Eidolon baby, something like that.
Yeah, it's probably not Eden. I think the text kind of made it seem like she intentionally like buried every bit of Eden. Remember, like the part where they brought down the old thing is like solid steel now, thanks to Custodian. But Eidolon baby would be a fun possibility. I don't know. This is definitely like something the chapter leaves us with, this open mystery of he has this whole nother thing that we haven't even seen yet.
Yeah,
and,
I feel like
on top of the scary shit we've just been witness to.
Right. I have this feeling like it's going to be something horrifying that we either haven't seen or that's like a permutation of something we've seen. Like I don't think it's going to be a simple answer.
Yeah, I think I think you're probably right. Yeah. I do like. I mean, reveals are fun when they are playing off of stuff we've seen before. Like a reveal doesn't work if it's just like, oh, here's a whole new concept. Or I mean, they work. They're just less exciting inherently. Yeah. So I mean, I don't think it's going to be something exactly that we've seen before, but a twist or a playoff of something. Yeah, I think so.
Right. I mean, it's sort of a hollow prediction to say like, yeah, it's going to involve one of the horrible things that we've seen before, but be new, right?
Uh-huh.
And I'm pretty sure Scion like vacuumed up all of the Eden pieces before he left. So I don't think that's what it is.
Before he left? Left life?
Well, before they collapsed the building on him, I'm pretty sure he had already vacuumed up the room.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so
now I'm imagining Scion with like an Auric or a Dyson.
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, I have a very clear image of him like slurping all of Eden up into a void.
It's weird that you have a clear image of that. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, it may not even happen too, which would be even more disturbing if that were the case.
It's all in your brain.
Yeah. Just wanted to have that in my head. So the chapter ends with the situation going red.
Yeah, which I love this because we don't have any idea what that means, but context is bad. Red equals bad.
Yep.
Especially when Saint's the one that delivers the message. Fucking Saint. We didn't like this fucking guy's back.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome.
Right. Yeah. I love that he's just hanging around.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Saint.
Yeah. Thanks for hanging out.
Here. Yeah.
He's still here. It's just, he's only here because he's still really worried about Dragon, Matt. Yeah. That's the only reason.
He's such an altruist.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. We move on into 13.9 and we're back with our standoff in the upper story of the lodge, with certain elements of the villain population on the upper floor advocating for a shoot first, ask questions later kind of justice against the old man. But Semiramis, I'm going to try to say it that way. We were told to say it that way. Semiramis being the only powerful figure pushing for restraint. She wants information and understanding of how all this happened, so she's not totally gung-ho to just kill the guy.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to do here as we get into this chapter is talk about reading these chapters back to back. Because, like, we read them separately. Like, I read 13.x on Friday, and I read this one on Sunday. So I had a little bit of a break between them. A lot of people got more of a break. They got almost a whole week. I think this is an interesting experience. And I want to talk like how Wildbow navigates this a little bit, because we move directly from this like universe-wide existential dread closing of a chapter. Teacher has just taken over basically all of Earthsea. He has the ability to mind control anybody. He has a huge army, a massive information network, a god basically in the Overseer, and has just shifted into the red, meaning whatever that means, whatever it is, it's going down, and it's going down soon. So we've established this huge like worldwide existential dread, oh my god, what's going to happen chapter. And then we move back into a non-interlude chapter. We move back into 13 now, and 9, and we have to shift back into the book proper. We have to move from this existential dread to something different. And I was thinking about this for a while, because like if you had told me just generally this idea that like, okay, at the end of this chapter, we're going to open Pandora's box, and then we're going to immediately shift away from that to like a bar fight, I would have been like, what about the box though? So I think what's interesting here is that what the opening of this chapter has to do, especially if you're reading them back to back, what the opening of this chapter has to do is get you invested enough again with the smaller scope direct conflict in front of our protagonist, to where you're not like the entire time just thinking about what about that Pandora's box that we just opened. And I think this chapter succeeds in doing that. I do. And I just I thought it'd be fun to like look at why that is. And I think like you mentioned that this starts with a standoff. And I think that's one of the ways it does it, because we open up with a basic level of immediate tension where we just left off with our characters, where we don't know what's going on. And Wildbow uses this mystery of the old man, like who he is, how he's doing what he's doing, why, as kind of a way to propel us into this. We're like invested in figuring out who this guy is because it's been left open to us. And I just think that's a really effective way of, bringing us into this conflict and allowing us to, at least in our minds, set aside the existential holy shit teacher side of things for just long enough that the emotional payoffs in this chapter pay off the way they should.
Yeah, I think that's all true, but I think there's also another thing that's going on, which is that we've shifted the problem that the protagonist is solving. The problem prior to roughly this point was, who wrote the diary? Who's doing all of this? Who's behind all this? What's going on? We got to figure it out, because it's a threat. It's gonna mess up my life as Victoria. It's gonna mess up the teams. We're very concerned about this. Now, at about this point, we've figured out who's behind it and what their goal is. We've solved that mystery. Now the problem has to shift. The problem that the character is solving, because I've said this on previous episodes. Like a big thing Wildbow does is, you are problem solving along with the character. That's a lot of the fun that we get out of these stories. Mm-hmm. So now the problem that you're solving is no longer what's the solution to the mystery. We know the solution to the mystery. The problem is now, oh shit, Victoria's up against that. How is she going to deal with that? And yes, we are moving back into this like low stakes, apparently kind of superficially low stakes conflict inside the lodge. But what you're thinking the whole time is like, okay, she has to get the old man out of here because she has to use him as a lead. She has to get some kind of edge now that we realize that the fight she's really fighting is Teacher and his whole army going red on her pretty much immediately. So I think that's one way that it basically reconnects the whole story to this new level of problem solving.
Yeah, I like the way you said that. I like that a lot. Yeah, there is definitely a shift here, and even though they're not fully conscious of that teacher level yet, there is an understanding that their goals have shifted. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Yeah, because a lot of this conflict. A lot of the conflict in this chapter is specific to the old man. Like it becomes the old man reveal to, using the old man as a bargaining chip to then we have to save him.
And I want to be really clear that it may sound like you and I just contradicted each other, but I don't think we did at all. I think you were pointing out what Wildbow is doing in this scene to make the stakes of this scene immediate and make you invested in this scene. And I was pointing out how Wildbow has reframed everything such that the macro is reoriented, so this scene is connected to the macro in a new way. So there's the micro and the macro. You were talking about the micro, I'm talking about the macro, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the two sides in this standoff are basically competing to see who's going to share information first, since they both want to know more without giving the other side too much. Victoria gets tired of Tattletale's shit and tells Semiramis everything about the Case 12, the old man. Apparently he feeds people his tissues. Of course he does. It's parahumans. And then he's linked to them, which Victoria leaves vague on purpose. But this fact alone, even without elucidation, is enough to cause a near altercation with the cowboy-themed patron.
Yeah, and so I want to break this down a little bit. Like the first thing we have to talk about is, we talked last week about how Tattletale was basically in charge of the investigation up until that moment at the really end of the chapter, where Victoria finally was able to use her particular set of knowledge to get into the game a little bit. And now we've got this this trinity of detectives bouncing off each other. We have Sveta, Victoria, and Lisa. They all are technically on the same side. They all are trying to get the same thing, but they're all different people. And they have differing methodologies for getting the stuff. And a lot of the dynamic of this chapter is those personalities pinging off each other in amusing and frustrating ways. And I think it's cool that we've, like, normally you would say naturally that Lisa is probably the best at this sort of thing just because of her power. But we've already established that Victoria's save with the old man pivot point says that just because she's maybe good at this, she's not necessarily the best one at any given situation.
Yeah.
But the way that plays out is we're seeing Sveta basically like tendril kicking Lisa's leg under the table when she's being terrible. She's being just a little bit too much of a brat. And the Victoria like basically like says fuck off to Lisa's hand signal, right? Like this part is Tattletale leaned back looking at me. Her hand went from fist to flat as if indicating something, like a hand signal for a fucking dog. Whatever. So hand signals in this book have been used to communicate before, Victoria. Tristan used a very similar signal on you. You used the same signal back to him later. And yet the signal in this moment is, oh, sound like a fucking dog or something. Well, screw you. I'm going to do what I want. It's just a delightful way of escalating the conflict, right? Like not only are we're working with people that don't want to give us information, but we're also having these mini spats between us as well. And it complicates everything, and it makes it more fun. And challenging, and it's great. Victoria's attitude here is kind of just like, I'm done with this shit.
Yeah, definitely makes it more entertaining, and I like the element that, you know, Lisa is her own worst enemy pretty consistently as a character across all of these stories, and I think it might be helping actually to have someone like Sveta who is like, first of all, the first word that popped into my head was guileless, but I don't think that's the right word. I think that it's more like she hates that there have to be these like lack of trust and backstabbing, and like she wishes everyone could just like have a conversation, and so she's being very like continually pressing for kind of a compromise or and so is Victoria actually. And so they're being a very solid counterweight to Tattletale's usual strategy, which is just like, I'm just gonna ruin your life if you don't tell me what I want you to tell me. Yeah, which probably wouldn't have worked out for her here.
No, not at all. Yeah. I really like it though. Yeah. Like Victoria's like the whole attitude throughout, especially the early part of this chapter, is so delightful because the next thing she does is completely like drag the desperado guy, his fashion choices. Like it's one of the biggest fashion burns in this book, and I think that's saying something. Yeah, he had the Western desperado look, which arguably came into style and inarguably went out of style in the course of 1 month in 1998. Yeah, just like. Boom.
Yeah. She burned this guy so bad that I feel bad for Rusty from our
I know
Reaper Dice campaign.
I kind of inserted him in this role. I don't know if you did that, but I think I mentally like subconsciously inserted him into this desperado.
I probably
role.
Did too. Yeah.
I just think it's a great way of again establishing her mood, right? Like, yeah, I mean she talks shit about people's outfits all the time, but this is like an especially harsh burn.
Yeah. It's hilarious.
It is funny that like what chapter 13.x did for us though is kind of want us to question everything. Like, is this the teacher pawn, right? Is this the guy that they specifically said they were going to use here? And that dramatic irony gets to play off here.
Yeah, I kind of assumed it was, and I don't see any real counter evidence. Although, for some reason I thought they said he was downstairs, so maybe not.
Yeah, it might be someone else downstairs. Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, the old man, apparently he gets some of the memories of people that he's linked with, and then he has an instinctive read on people later, and then he tends to use proxies when he actually like takes action, which is, you know, if you're going to have a parahuman who lives a long time, that's pretty much the power they would have, right? Like somebody who doesn't tend to put themselves directly into harm's way.
Yeah. But
Makes sense.
It is interesting what the book is doing here, though, I think. Because they say here that Old Man's power seems like it would very much grant him the ability to fuck with people in the exact way that Victoria is currently being fucked with, right? But again, this mystery has already been solved for us, the reader. We know who planted the diary. We know who's responsible for this. And we know that Old Man is like an unwilling plant from Teacher's organization. Like he doesn't know about it, but they are using him. But we know he's not the one responsible for this. But our characters are still working through the possibilities. And I just thought, like, this is one of those attention to detail things that I think really helps make the scenes feel real and the characters feel real. It's like, just because the reader has discovered this thing doesn't mean the characters aren't going to still have to process through the possibility. Like, they work through this and they say, okay, it could be him, but nah, probably not. It doesn't feel right.
Well, for all they know, it's literally a coincidence that he's here.
Yeah, right.
Which actually makes more sense than you might think at first. Like you're already in the position of being like, oh yeah, well, I mean, we know the teacher is using this guy, but it could just as easily be the case that, like, well, yeah, of course the bartender at the supervillain hideout would be a secret parahuman. That makes perfect sense.
Right.
Yeah.
But one thing this conversation does let them go down is this idea, this general idea that what Tattletale decides Teacher is doing is he's devoting a lot of resources to keep others from connecting and connecting dots. So Teacher is off there connecting dots himself, and he's stopping other people from doing it, as well as just generally connecting. And I mean, that just slots so perfectly into these themes that we've been talking about for these last few chapters, like this idea of connection as strength and power. And even Teacher admits that, and therefore is specifically trying to stop it.
Yeah. Does it strike you as a super Lisa thing to say, to like use a turn of phrase that's going to take everybody else like an extra 2 seconds to parse?
Yes, absolutely.
Connecting and connecting dots.
And Victoria almost like frustrating, like she doesn't directly call her on that, but she does, like, is the one that like verbalizes those two things that you just said are distinct.
Yeah, like, right. I'm going to spell this out for everyone.
The unnecessary translation because she just had to be clever about her word usage. Yes.
Yeah.
It's fun. Like, it's one of those things that, like, in reading a book, I read the line connecting and connecting dots, and I'm like, ooh, that's good writing. But like, yeah, in actual like everyday living life dialogue, if someone said that to me, I'd just be like, say what you mean.
Right. Yeah, I get it. Come on.
Right.
Yeah, right. So then there's a back and forth about what Teacher is doing and what Engel saw specifically when she was at the Cauldron base. Aside from the stuff we're already aware of, she saw people with brooms, which you can make a lot of this, right? I mean, I like the first guess was like, well, if the thralls have brooms, then that's an indication that the overseer is out of the complex at that moment, and they're trying to keep it clean, or I don't know. I'm doing that thing where I go too many levels of chess ahead. I don't actually know exactly what it could mean. What do you think? Yeah,
I mean, they're like they're people with brooms, but they're very specifically trying to hide the fact that they have brooms.
Yeah,
like they tried and failed to hide that they were holding brooms. So yeah, I mean, it might be an indication that the overseer is not always overseeing, and they don't want that to be common knowledge. They want people to feel like they're constantly being oversaw.
Yeah, it could also be the element that they don't want people to realize that the overseer is being used offensively. Like if you think overseer is always at the Cauldron base, then you don't put up precautions to an invisible, intangible woman snooping around your shit, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, so.
I do like how Tattletale has another fun turn of phrase here, though. Teacher is in an unreachable extra-dimensional complex with the army of thralls and other allies. Thralls with brooms. It's just like this perfect nonsense thing that she just has to add.
There were a lot of laughs in these two chapters, and I didn't pull them out because I mean, I don't know. It's not necessarily funny to just like be like, haha, remember this? But like, I don't know. I laughed a lot in these two chapters.
Yeah. All right, Matt. I want to talk about Cauldron a little bit.
Let's do it.
Because I think the book is asking us to do this. And so we're going to get into it. 2 chapters ago, we had Sveta and Lisa bring up the old, was Cauldron right morality debate again. And at the time, when we were reading this book, we thought that this was kind of random, but indicative of the severe differences of the two characters. This debate kind of shows us they're two outlooks on morals and morality and life, and allows us to clearly delineate those differences. And it is absolutely that. But since then, we've brought the concept of Cauldron back into the story in a big way. If there's one thing that these two chapters have shown us, it's that Cauldron is back. It's different. Lisa points out here specifically that it's different, that Cauldron went at things with a scalpel and precise knowledge of what they wanted to achieve, whereas Teacher is doing things with just like the brute force ability, resource ability. Like, he doesn't have to target specifically because he can target everything all at once, 5 people on every single person type of thing. So it is different. But I think as Cauldron, as Custodian kind of put it in her chapter, it's not a ship of Theseus, it is Cauldron still. Because she is there, it is Cauldron. They're doing similar things. They're working towards a specific goal while preventing people from discovering about their goal and discovering about them. They're controlling groups, they're exerting influence. We don't know what that final goal is yet, but his methods are a less precise-ish Cauldron-esque attack. So, Matt, why do we think we're doing this? We're bringing back Cauldron, and not only are we bringing Cauldron back, we're bringing back the ongoing Cauldron debate into the story proper, right? This idea of was Cauldron right was brought by our characters, and I think the book is wanting to confront this idea directly again through this reborn Cauldron's actions.
Yeah, well, I think, there's a lot of evidence that you're right. We're bringing up K-53s several times in these chapters. We're literally in the building. We literally have the line, "It is not a ship of Theseus, I am the constant," implying that there is a line of continuation back from when it was Cauldron, that just because the Cauldron people aren't here anymore doesn't mean it's not the same thing in a sense, right? I mean, it's clearly not the same thing, right?
Right.
Their goals, we don't actually know what Teacher's like deep down what Teacher's goal is, but it's probably similar though. Like, it's probably similar to I bet he thinks he's saving the world. He's just doing it in his Teacher way, just like Contessa was doing it in her Contessa way, and both of them are going to be monstrous in different ways.
Yeah, and I think the differences that Lisa points out here specifically relate to their differences in powers. Like, you could almost argue it's the same goal. The reason Cauldron was precise and surgical is because that's how Contessa's power operated. Yeah. The reason they're this 5 sets of eyes on every last person that matters is because that's Teacher strength. So it's like the same but different.
Yeah. I like that.
And I like this because there's this central question at the feet of Cauldron that Worm talks about a lot, is was what they were doing okay? Like, you did all these terrible things, but you did them with the goal of saving the world. And I think that book has a lot to say about whether that's good or not, or that pure utilitarian view of things is the not necessarily the correct one, but is as simple as.
You could reframe and just say the book is very interested in challenging that view.
I think that's right. And I think the reintroduction of that here serves to bring about that challenge again, because we have these people that did all these terrible things to save the world. The world was saved. Now we could debate, how much their influence in things saved the world and how much it didn't, but the world was saved, right? Not every human being is not dead. So hooray. But the choices they made, the things they did, the monsters they created, quote unquote, are continuing to carry out their stuff, right? So there's this interesting question that the book could possibly pose, and I don't think it has fully done this yet, but it feels like we're gearing up for that. It's like, okay, so you do all these terrible things to save the world. You succeed. Then the terrible things that you created to do that try to end the world. Yeah. So where does that put our calculus, right?
Right. Or create a world that's worse than, basically create a fate worse than death for the entire world.
Right.
You know, I mean, this it almost feels like a reflection of what we've asked before. Like, someone kind of jokingly said, if Grey Boy can put people in loops for 1 billion years, then is Cauldron automatically a net negative proposition? And the answer, I think we flippantly said yes to that. But this is a more yeah. I mean, this is a more clear example of that, right? Where we're actually talking about the possibility of teacher actually taking over and actually making the world in his image, basically, which speaks to a lot of the themes in the story, right? Of loss of agency being such a powerfully negative thing that he's basically gonna do to everyone.
Yeah, and the differing viewpoints of what survival, of what recovery, of what moving forward is. And teachers is like we saw through the custodian chapter what teachers view. If teacher wins and takes over the entire world, we kind of saw what it's going to look like.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And it's not great. It's not great. Right. And so I do think, I'm not going to sit here and say that the book is trying to answer the was Cauldron right question in any kind of definitive way. I think Wildbow's writing is a little more clever than to clearly 100% unquestionably come down on a certain side. But I do think that this is being confronted again in ways in which those questions were confronted a lot in Worm in a different kind of way.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's setting up situations where precisely one half of the readers are going to say, well, obviously X, and the other half are going to say, well, obviously not X.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, that's one of the many great things about these stories is how often Wildbow is able to create those situations, actually.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool.
So let's pay attention to Cauldron going forward, or Cauldron. What are we going to call Teacher's Cauldron?
That's a good question. We haven't thought of that.
Yeah, we need a name. Audience, come up with something cool. Teacher Cauldron.
What's funny is that apparently Mortari was the name for Citrine Cauldron, and Beaker is actually a better name for Teacher Cauldron because beakers are what you use like in high school, chemistry class. But I don't know. That's too confusing. We can't reuse that. We'll think of something.
We can crowdsource this, and the people more creative than us will come up with an answer.
Yes, let's do it. Crowdsource. But by let's do it, I mean y'all do it. Okay. All right.
The royal let's.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so we move back into the chapter, and Tattletale is speaking, and I just like how she sketches out the situation. I just kind of like this. It's helpful for the characters to kind of remind us what the situation is. So she says, Semiramis can help us with details from the past. Midas can help us with details in the present. You are our insurance for the future. Tattletale told him, speaking to Prancer, keep your ear to the ground. You should have a sense of what to look for. Wedges, attacks from an angle that use communication and separate or disrupt people. You're best networked among low-level villains. Keep an eye on them. Report to us. So, I mean, I like dialogue like this where, obviously there's a in-universe reason for her to be saying all this stuff to Prancer, but it's great because we kind of need this to be explained to us because it's pretty complicated what's happening right here. There's a lot of agendas. There's a lot of background details where the details actually matter. You can't just kind of be like, I'll figure it out later. So I think I don't know. I just thought that was a good little snippet of dialogue.
I agree. Sometimes exposition is good and needed. And this is one of those areas in which we need this to be laid out for us a little bit. And that's exactly what the chapter does. And I appreciate it because it also shows very clearly why each of these three people are here, right? Like we give them each an important role. We understand what their role is and why we need each of them to say yes. And it helps frame the conflict when Midas is like, no.
Right.
Yeah. There is something before we move on, I do want to touch on a bit here that I really, really appreciated because after they're striking this arrangement, Semiramis is talking about reaching back out to the two Case 53s that she was trying to employ that ended up backing out and saying, hey, when you're talking to them, mention that I'd like to do that again. I'd like to get in on that again. And Sveta's like, oh, you're going to put him in another sex scene again? And she's like, yeah, I mean, probably. Like, isn't that great? Isn't that what we want? Like, acceptance of the body, something deeper than a one kiss on screen. And they go into this, they kind of not devolve, they segue into this discussion of how you depict things on television that haven't been socially acceptable, and how you can push the envelope by depicting these things in entertainment. And it's this really cool conversation about this thing. And really what I just wanted to point out here is this idea that everything is connected. We've got this central plot of this entire arc was the case of Victoria's diary. Who wrote this? Why are they doing this to her? And that's been what's driving the plot forward. But in the middle of this thing, we have the Sveta bomb that's being dropped with Weld, and she's pulled into everything. But now we see all this stuff is kind of connected, right? Because we had Semiramis, we had Big Picture and the Case 53 stuff going on. We've got Teacher and New Cauldron being something that is very specific to Sveta as well. Like it's just like we're bringing all this stuff up, and all this stuff is happening at the same time for a narrative reason. They are connected to each other. They're not just one-offs. They're not just things like, oh yeah, we're also dealing with Sveta while we're dealing with this thing. They are things that are linked now. The book has linked these things together in an important way. And a lot of these conversations about Case 53s, about Cauldron, are playing off of the things that Sveta is specifically going through. And that's detailed, well-structured writing, like to where everything feels like it's part of the same story and not like a specific subplot, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's perfectly well sketched out. Yeah. Everything is interlinked to everything else, usually in like two different ways, right?
Yeah.
Not just one way, but it's a web more than a chain.
Yeah.
I like that. Cool. I like that a lot. So Midas, like you said a minute ago, refuses to help in any way, shape, or form, which Tattletale rather quickly accepts as a given and then tries to move on. And then he seems perturbed that she doesn't press him on it. And in fact, when the team decides they need to take the old man with them when they leave, Midas becomes a huge pain in the ass.
Yeah, and he basically says that the reason why she acquiesced to his saying no at the beginning was because she knew this was going to happen, and therefore, because she was so willing to just say, oh, okay, now he like extra looks like the bad guy, because not only is he saying no, he's also confronting them about the old man, and it makes him look even worse. And it was just clever tattletale maneuvering, which, I mean, there's no reason, the text gives us no reason not to believe that is absolutely what Lisa was doing there, right?
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I think that's cool.
I mean, and it's totally something that she could have got with her power. Like, right. She would be very good at reading people's intentions. Yeah. I mean,
and it's fun because I think the cool thing is this chapter gives all three of our detectives something to do throughout. Right. Victoria played a pretty key role and continues to play a pretty key role at the end of this. Tattletale has her moments too. Sveta has her really great moments too, where she's offering solutions. We'll just take them. We'll just take it. Yeah. I love the reaction to that. It's like,
right.
No, that's not what I meant.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. It's cool that everyone gets their moments. And this also really helps pay off that dramatic irony we set up in 13.x, because we know one of the reasons why Midas is being so resistant here is because he at least partially works for the dude that they're trying to find information about.
Right. Speaking of moments, I just gotta love this badass moment where it's clear there's gonna be some kind of altercation, and Victoria and Sveta both like rise out of their chairs without technically standing, such that they're just like suddenly looming over everyone. It's just such a really great image.
Yeah, Victoria flies and Sveta just like straightens her tendrils a little bit. Yeah, it's really great. Sometimes we love these characters so much that we forget how just naturally intimidating they can be. And I think you basically pointed that out to me last week when I said like, this whole scene is goofy. And you were like, no, Victoria's probably scary as shit. Look at her. Yeah. And I think this is a great reminder of, yes, she's absolutely that scary as shit person when she needs to be.
What's funny is like my actual visualization of Victoria throughout this arc has changed to her being like, I've known all along that her costume is like black with like gold armor, but I just kind of just like my brain has emphasized the black hood so much more. I guess ever since she started wearing the black mask too,
Yeah.
It kind of changes her whole aspect, right? To have this, and because later on in the scene, she takes off the mask and pulls down the hood to like make a connection, which reminds us that she's been wearing the mask and the hood this whole time.
Yeah, I want to talk about that moment for sure. I think that's really important.
Okay. Okay.
But before we do that, let's talk about this monologue Victoria gives herself when she's trying to defend this old man and save him from dying, right?
Okay.
I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's long because it's long. But there's this idea that he represents something. He represents survival. Like every parahuman lives with this idea that we're going to have a short lifespan. We're not going to last very long. We're going to get killed some way or another. It's just natural to who we are. But here is a man that is that exception. Here is a man that has, no matter what he's done, no matter how terrible he's lived his life, he has survived. And there's value in that. She like this thing, she ends it with, I hadn't exchanged any words with him. I had no idea who he was now, if he was aspiring to control like Teacher was, if he got off on feeding people bits of him, or if he was an angel. But I felt like I needed to protect that. And that, of course, is his representative of survival. And I think this is like such a wonderfully fascinating like exploration of who Victoria is. And it's not the first time we've seen her value survival, right? The Major Malfunctions were a group that a lot of people discounted, but Victoria specifically valued them because they had survived. And not only had they survived together. So like, it's not like a new trait of hers, but this is really the culmination of that trait. It's like just the idea of this, a cape being old is gives me and everyone hope that our end will not be death. Our end will not be terrible. That we could survive long enough to live, and just the fact that he managed to, no matter what he did, he managed to get through that. I think is a very powerful, like, expression of who she is as a person.
Yeah, I think it seems like it's something she wants to protect for its own sake too. Like, right. The text doesn't say, "I wanted to talk to him and figure out his secret."
No,
I mean, maybe she wants to on some level if she gets a chance. Maybe they will have a conversation if she gets a chance, but she's literally just thinks this is a thing worth protecting. And that's like you said. I also like this language where she says every parahuman I knew who'd been in the game for a while absorbed it, and meaning every parahuman assumes that they're going to die early. And on one level, usually I would just take this at face value and just be like, yeah, Victoria knows a lot of capes. She's probably right about this. But I think very often, thinking of her as like a real person, as like a well-written character, very often we think thoughts like that, where we're like, everyone knows, everyone thinks this way. It's just the fabric of our world is this assumption that everyone is a certain way. That's just us projecting. And we do that all the time. Right. So like I can see this as being Victoria just being spot on about parahumans, but I can also see it as Victoria just completely projecting her view that she doesn't expect to live a long time. She was raised in this Cape family where people died around her and horrible things happened to her family. She, seems to me like Victoria's witnessed more death than average, although I don't know if that's technically true. But anyway, I don't know. I love the language where the text doesn't draw attention to it at all, and you might be right in just taking it at face value. But I like to think that maybe she is just projecting here.
I like that a lot. I really do. I do think that there is some value to looking at it that way. That Victoria has a very specific idea of what being a cape is, and she does put that on every single one of them. Right or wrong, it could be 100% correct. You're right, but I like that. I kind of want to put a pin in that and pay attention to that as we go through the story, because that is, I think that is something we probably will see come up again. Maybe not in the exact same way, but in different kind of ways. Is this understanding of this is what a cape means to Victoria specifically, and that informs how she interacts with these other people, assuming that they view it in the exact same way. Yeah,
I think you're right. I mean, I can think of capes off the top of my head who I don't think have that kind of fatalistic view. So, yeah. Like Parian is the first one who jumps to mind.
Yeah.
So we're gonna move on, and so we got Tattletale and Victoria, as you said, taking hilariously different tacks in their approach to trying to talk their way out of the place with the old man. Victoria eventually, like we said, takes off her mask and her hood to make her offer, which includes letting the villains in on their whole prison planet process. And it's actually her semi-joking finders keepers argument that seems to make Midas back down, which you're like, oh, that, good job, Victoria. Of course, Midas backing down is just a trick, and he's just like basically taking it as an opportunity to look like he's going to back down so that he can try to kill the old man in like 5 seconds.
Yeah. I was not like, oh, good job, Victoria. I was like, really? That's what did it? I want to talk about, like we said, I want to talk about that moment where she takes off her mask and lowers her hood, because I think this feels like a culmination of the arc to me. And we don't know. We're recording this on a Monday night, so the Tuesday chapter has not come out yet. We do not know if the arc is finished or not. It could very well go on, but this does feel like we're coming full circle a little bit here, because we started this arc off with the heroes disappearing people into that portal, right? Into that prison planet. Victoria is torn on how she feels about it. And while she's doing it, she puts on her new black mask. While she's pondering it, she puts on that mask. We pointed this out at the time. This is a black mask in the arc titled Black. And she's putting on this mask while she's doing this. Now here, 10 chapters later, after having her name dragged through diary mud and being forced to deal and interact with some people that she doesn't really like very much, and she probably would have disappeared, some of these people, given the opportunity. In this moment, she takes off that black mask, she exposes her real face, and she promises to let them in on the process, to at least let them inspect the process for disappearing people through the portal. Give them access and information, how it works, show them what they're doing, making it less secretive, making it more known. This feels really significant to me. Mm-hmm. This feels like a culmination of the arc to me.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I feel like she's taken the mask off and then put it back on at other points, but I absolutely agree that the parallel between when she first got the mask and this moment, it makes a big deal of it, right? Takes the mask off, pulls the hood down specifically so that she can like show them her face, convey some honesty and some humanity.
Yeah. And invite, like, a lot of the problem we had and a lot of the problem she had with this process is how insular, how secretive, how only controlled by a certain segment of the population is. And I don't even know if she like has the authority to make that call, right? To say it's like, yeah, come on in to right. the warden's headquarters.
Right.
And learn all about this process. But I don't think she's just bullshitting here either. I think she sees it as a way of maybe subconsciously making herself feel better about if more people are aware of the process, if more people, even people on the other side, are signing off on this process, then it feels like not exactly a reestablishment of the old rules, but something close to that. Like if the bad guys and the good guys have both signed off on this consequence, then it is much more accepted what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. We made the comparison back then that a black hood with a black eyeless mask is basically an executioner's hood, right? Mm-hmm. And she's taking on the role of an executioner and sending these people to their death, probably.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I like this idea that here it's meaningful that she's taking off the executioner's hood.
Yeah.
I'll be really interested to see. I mean, I don't remember if the text says that she puts it back on in this chapter, and I'll be interested to see what role the mask plays going forward. I mean, obviously it's going to be meaningful.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the way downstairs, they're chatting. Victoria learns that she hit Etna so hard that she retired, in Tattletale's words. One of the many excellent laughs. And then the following line, which is also great. More than 1080, and I didn't punt. I spun, stopped, and after a momentary pause, I very firmly introduced her to the hillside. I measured my strength. And worried you killed her, Tattletale said. You worried you killed her. So good.
This is great. And I mean, it's a payoff for something we've been, dealing with for the past 2 chapters. Like last week, we talked about how they specifically noted that hey, Etna's not here. And we joked about, oh, definitely dead. And of course, that's exactly what Victoria was thinking. And it needles at her. It needles at her more than the nameless soldier that she possibly killed, because there was a face to this one, a face that pissed her off, but a face. And I think it's interesting on multiple levels, right? It's interesting that Victoria checking someone into a hill made them become a good guy, possibly.
Yeah.
They said we wouldn't be surprised if we see her as a heroine, a low-level heroine later on, which is like, wow, okay, cool. But it is like, this is something she's been thinking about nonstop. Like this idea that, oh God, I used too much force here. I did too much. And I think it's funny that the second she knows that she's not dead, I measured my strength. Like it's like very much just like, it's almost as if like she's so relieved by this idea that it's like suddenly it's like, no, actually I did exactly what I needed to there. Like actually I was totally fine.
Yeah, I knew I didn't do anything wrong. I was just running away from myself.
Right.
Yeah.
And so much so much so that almost immediately after this point, Tattletale pisses her off again and is like, I'd like to throw her into a hill. Like the thing that has been, it has not been keeping her up necessarily, but she's had nightmares. Like that's one thing established at the very beginning of this arc. She's had, over the past 3 weeks, she's had terrible nightmares. Partially, at least we know, related to the fact that she took people's life. And Etna was one of those potential faces. And then it's like, oh, phew, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to throw some more people into hills. They piss me off. These magic hill checking, people flipping power that she has now. I just think it's very interesting. It's very human to do that, right? It's like, oh my God, I did this terrible thing. Oh my God, I did this terrible thing. Oh wait, it wasn't that terrible? Cool. Maybe I'll do that again then.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like I'm reaching here, but there's a sense in which Etna was like a Glory Girl parallel, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we pointed that out. Yeah.
Reckless, not really bothering to master her power. Yeah. I don't know. We could go on, right? A lot of parallels. And Victoria serves the role of being the event which causes her to rethink her life. In other words, Victoria is kind of Crawler and Amy wrapped up into one for this poor woman.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of
Am I reaching?
uncomfortable implications. Yeah, a little bit.
yeah, a little bit. Well, but in terms of the effect, though.
I get you. I get you. We are not. Let's not freak out about this. I get the end effect. You are correct. Yeah. Yes.
Obviously, I think it's clear that Etna wouldn't have made like a life-changing decision if it hadn't been a big deal to her. To her, this was probably a trauma. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, and it is interesting. I think someone in the Discord pointed this out, that like the deciding point of Etna's change of heart is not, I almost killed this poor little girl with molten lava. That didn't really get her to change her ways at all. But, someone hurt me really bad is the thing that jarred her into change. So sometimes like it feels bad to say, but sometimes like not having terrible things done to you is a bigger motivator than you doing terrible things.
Yeah. This definitely was necessary for Victoria.
Yeah.
So before that, there's a scuffle. The old man is injured. We're not sure how badly exactly, although he's going to live, according to Tattletale. Semiramis puts a stop to it by threatening to cave in the building, and the hero/villain detective team is able to get outside.
Yeah, but so Sveta again is clutch here, that she like catches the old man and cradles him gently in her tentacles. Like I was thinking back about this idea that like when Sveta joined this organization, we were like, shit, like, she's in a bad place. Like this, she could pop off at the worst time. And once again, I've been made to feel guilty about my prejudging of Sveta when she, except for a little particularly sharp Lisa ribbing, she's handled herself amazingly here.
Yeah. One thing we haven't talked about on the show, at least, is the fact that I don't think the self-loathing lessons are going to go well with the post-breakup mental state.
Yeah, true. I don't think we specifically mentioned last week when she was like, I'm losing control. I need another rain session.
Yeah.
And Victoria's like, absolutely not.
Yeah. That's the worst idea
Yeah.
anyone has said in the story so far, and that's saying something.
That is saying something. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
So,
I'm interested to see how that continues. Like, Sveta is this big mystery to me, because every time we think we got like an idea of where the story is going with her, it surprises me.
Yeah, me too. It's being withheld. It makes me even more anxious, right?
Yeah.
So this chapter ends with Tattletale guessing that things are going to go to shit within the next 45 minutes, which, we basically know is correct because teacher is going red at what is basically about this time.
Yeah. Roughly the exact
speaking.
same time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting because it's like, we know teacher's going to go red, and we know it's almost like things are happening at the same time and they're happening because of each other. Cause like there's this implication that the reason why teacher's like, okay, we're going red now is because they didn't stop Tattletale and Victoria from getting out with the old man, and they're getting very, very close, right? So the timeline is accelerating again. Yeah. So it's like this symbiotic thing almost, where like they're both, one thing is happening because of the other, and the other is happening because of the one thing, and it's great.
Yeah, I think you're right. All right, that wraps up the chapters for this week. Let's move on into the community spotlight. We'll start out discussing the previous discussion question from last week, which was most memorable setting in Parahumans and the function it serves. This is
one of those ones where we were expecting a lot of different answers, and I think we got it.
Yeah, we did. And so what's funny to me, the first three are, I'm gonna spoil this. The first three are the same setting, and it's not a setting that I don't think I would have picked. I mean, I agree that it's memorable. it never would have occurred to me. So Megafire mentions the Cauldron meeting room, and they say, speaking, however, of Cauldron, the setting that sticks in my mind after all these years is the Cauldron meeting room, where every major player is represented in their own booth with their own sign. The room is dark to keep faces hidden, and there's a constant level of tension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alternate Arrival says the same thing as you said, and they said the reason is they enjoyed this setting is because Weaver is watching the world fall apart, and then she's invited to a meeting of the people who have been pulling the strings since before the start of the story. It was always really evocative to me, the image of her standing by Tattletale and Gru, looking around at the most important people in the Cape scene.
Yeah, right. It's a cool moment of like, they've really made it now if they're being invited to this meeting, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, Villadin also mentions the Cauldron meeting room. They say, we see it first when the crushing news of a fourth Endbringer sends the world and our characters reeling, appearing first as a rectangle of light, almost glaringly bright, just beside my closet. There is something dreamlike and otherworldly about the whole place. And as we find out later, it is quite literally otherworldly, just adding to its strange feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I like that all three people here have mentioned kind of different things about it that they remember. But it just, to me, that just speaks to a setting that contains so much feeling to it.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
Cool.
Confusion Steve Hands says Ellisburg. I really love Ellisburg both times we see it, but especially on the second time with Nilbog's mad tea party. The realistic, quote-unquote, horror of the PRT raid sets up just exactly how surreal the later visit is, and it wouldn't work nearly as well as a Carol pastiche if it didn't have that surrealism to it. Yeah, I like that a lot. I forgot that we saw Ellisburg twice, but yeah, we had Pigot's interlude, right?
Yep. Yeah. The man, that really well said actually about how they said it perfectly. I'm not even gonna bother to.
Yeah, we can't. We'll just be repeating what they said in a slightly worse way.
Yeah. Cool. Good job. Yeah. Sarah Penguin says the Ward's HQ in Brockton Bay. The Ward's HQ is both a representation of the state of the city and the hero's ability to protect it, but also a representation of Taylor's descent into villainy and its repair as her heroic redemption. Sarah then tracks the setting over the course of about 9 different chapters. and basically how the setting details shift in reaction to what's happening in the story. And it's a really good post.
Yeah, that's really cool. One of the things that we haven't been saying that Sarah's been doing throughout this entire arc is tracking. She's made a handy chart for us, and she's tracking the instances in which mind screwery is being mentioned, and the instances in which relationships between capes is being, at the forefront of the story, and has accurately indicated that basically each and every one of those things is present in every single chapter of this arc so far.
Awesome. Cool.
It's really cool. Next up, we have Nameless218, who says, the mall cluster dream room. The tension of being forced into a room with people you shared such trauma with after reliving the events with near perfect clarity, the plotting and scheming by each member, the trading of power and at a terrible cost to it, and finally the empty part of the room and all the implications it holds.
Yeah, I love that setting.
Yeah,
I agree.
We did not mention in this week's chapter that there is another hint at that hidden room, right? There is like they have actual like reading and access into what's going on in the dream room in Teacher's organization, and they mention that segment of the room again. This long burn mystery that's driving me crazy.
Yeah, that was my take as well, that they actually have some way of seeing the dream room.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was a correct read, but yeah, okay, yeah. Cool.
I don't think it's like seeing like optically, like they're getting data. Like they're getting visual. I think they're getting like reported data on what's going on within those rooms.
Okay, I see. I gotcha. B-side Baby says, for me, it will always be that first glimpse of the plane studded with the shards that we see during trigger events. There was something both dreadful and inevitable in the description, somehow evocative of a battlefield. We eventually learn that it is a literal field of invasion.
Oh, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
That's a thing I didn't think about, but that's a good answer.
Yeah, I love that.
Next up, we have No Gooby, who says the Golden City, colored by a remnant of the past. Pillars bearing the names of the dead line the streets, as numerous as there were trees. Schools armed the young with weapons and gear to help keep the peace. The internet is available, but just barely. Portals to the other worlds are a thing. There are corner worlds even. Yeah, so the mega city at the start of the book was a very powerful place for No Gooby, and I agree with that. I don't know if it's weird to admit this, but sometimes I just go back and open the first chapter again and read those first few paragraphs just randomly because I really, really, really love them. I think they're fantastic. I think the amount of pressure it must be put on a writer to begin your story, and I think the opening of the story is really, really great.
Yeah. As
it establishes this new setting.
Yeah, I mean, I go back and read parts that I like fairly often, so I don't think it's weird. I mean, and I remember last week we talked about the Golden City specifically as being this place that has just gotten more and more of a nightmare realm.
Yeah.
Over the course of the story, and almost in a boiling frog way, where at no point does Victoria really look around and like think like, holy shit, this is out of control.
Yeah.
She's just kind of keeping track of the latest crisis usually.
Yeah, and I think that the state of the city now only serves to me to accentuate the beauty of the opening image, because it's this inherent contradiction, right? That like the hope of a golden tomorrow of like sunshine and hope and light and progress tinged with the color that actually is representative of the past and the terrible things that happened. Now, even that has been like shattered and broken a little bit. I think it's even more powerful given where the city is in the story now.
Yeah, I think you're right. Farm Fresh Hornets chooses two answers, so I'm just going to pick one of them. Los Angeles. Tohu and Bohu completely mess up the geography of it, turning it into a terrible hellhole. And then that terrible hellhole becomes an arena for the battle between Jack and Theo, with, of course, the other heroes and the S9000 clones in the background.
I honestly forgot that was LA, but I mean, that's really cool.
Yeah. I think that was somewhere in my brain, but yeah, thanks for reminding me. And yeah, I mean, it's such a great setting. Like, you establish this concept that these Endbringers turn places into, dungeons from D&D basically.
Yeah.
And then you have to have a showdown. Your final showdown is there at one of those places.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Proudly Arrogant basically points out that every single setting in these stories is memorable, which, touche.
Yeah, right. They just list a bunch of like really minor ones, and you're like, yeah, of course I remember that setting. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of them. Yeah. I like that.
Literal Headcanon says Brockton Bay. It's a Parahumans take on the distinct fictional city trope we see in classic comic versus Metropolis, Gotham City, Brockton Bay. It's not a clear take on a specific existing real city, but it still feels like a developed real place. Yeah. Sure. I mean, like a lot of these things in the story, it changes over the course of the story.
Yeah.
Cool.
And yeah, it's been through some shit too.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Green Door 65 says Cauldron headquarters. Hey, that's fitting.
Yeah.
It's emblematic of their organization, vast, mysterious, utilitarian, and utterly cold and sterile. It just raises questions. Who built it? Who else worked there? What kind of horrors hide in these endless vaults that we never get to see? What other kind of wondrous technologies and powers did they have stashed away that they never got to use? Whose stories began and ended here that we will never hear? I like the way that's written. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have much to add there. It's really great. Really great. Stelhex also says the Cauldron headquarters. The structure, they basically quote this this bit that I think they basically just found this to be a really evocative bit. So that's why they bring this out. The structure has shifted, rotated. It's designed to, corkscrewing down over time and with any degree of force or movement. It ensures the integrity of the panic room function, and it would have confused some of the first powerful non-Cauldron teleporters we were aware of. The route you use to enter no longer leads into whatever corridor or entry point you use to break through. We'd have to dig anew. I mean, it's just I guess the cool thing about this is that like they literally have like this ridiculously complex corkscrewing falling panic room built into their incredibly elaborate base. It's just this great, emphasis on how how much of a crazy supervillain lair this place is.
Yeah, absolutely. That does help. The ridiculous insanity of it kind of really helps establish the villaininess of that lair. Yeah. Bregalad HS says the Undersider's Loft. It's not hugely important to the plot, at least not compared to other places, but very interesting in its relation to Taylor. On the one hand, it's a place where a bunch of teenage friends can hang out completely without adult supervision. For Taylor, who has been both bullied by her peers and repeatedly let down by adult authority figures, it's the only positive social environment she currently has access to. Of course, the place itself is not that important to Taylor, but it helps us, the readers, understand why she's so drawn to these guys. It's the dream of any teenager, and it offers Taylor freedom and independence from the things and the people that she doesn't want to deal with. On the other hand, it's the headquarters of a criminal organization that our protagonist has infiltrated on her own without any real plan and the intention of betraying them all. It adds a certain tension to the story and stresses to the character, especially since she has spent a lot of time in close quarters with a dangerous thinker who could figure out her secret at any time. And of course did figure out her secret immediately. Yeah. I like that. I like that central dichotomy. And I agree. Like I remember like the feeling of this place the first time Taylor visited it, the first time Taylor was given a spot here, like given her room, and how important and essential and freeing that was to her as a person at the time. It was powerful. It's crazy to think like go all that back when like the most important thing happening to her was she has a place that she could just hang out and not feel judged. But
right. No, that's great. I mean, I remember feeling a sense of loss when they all moved to their own separate supervillain layers at different parts in the city. It felt like an era had been lost where like a lot of what Taylor was getting out of being a supervillain was the social life for the first time.
Right. Yeah, and it's essentially more adult too. It's not like she moved from a loft of hanging out like video games and junk food and rooms to each having their own base, and hers is creepy as shit.
Yeah.
It is a move to a different kind of organization, away from the teen gang onto more dark stuff.
Yeah. I like that answer a lot. Me for Mars says the graveyard where Annette Hebert was laid to rest.
Aww.
The graveyard itself isn't overly described, more its location relative to the rest of Brockton Bay's landmarks. It's out of the way, away from where most of the action of Worm has happened so far. That said, it's of great importance for Taylor, so much so that she unconsciously seeks it out. Yeah. What's interesting about when she actually seeks it out is like you're not sure whether she's unconsciously seeking out, or whether she's seeking it out and just not thinking about the fact that she's seeking it out.
Yeah.
Taylor's a very complicated little person there. So
yeah, and I think the fun thing about this to me is, it's been a while since we've talked about Worm. And we've spent weeks and weeks and hours talking about this book, to the point where, you start to forget what was in that past book.
Mm-hmm.
And the parts that really stick out to you then become the ones that you just have to say are the most impactful to you.
Mm-hmm.
And Taylor at her mother's grave is a part that I still can remember, like, almost perfectly clearly here 2 years later, whatever. I like that is one of those scenes in the book that just sticks in my brain. And I love this answer, because I absolutely agree. Like, it's a place that she goes once. We never really see it again, but it is so key to this monumental shift in what the character is trying to do, that it just has planted itself in my head.
Yeah, me too. I agree. Love it.
All right. Next we have Death of the Artist, who talks about how politics and settings influence characters. For example, how the Americans and the glimpses of Indian, African, and Chinese capes imply how wildly different their backrooms really are, and how realistic and varied the world is. So yeah, they went a little bit of a different direction, and talked about, not necessarily how settings influence characters, but not how characters influence settings, but how settings influence character.
Yeah, right. Because we do spend some time in New Delhi. We get a sense of that as a setting, but
yeah.
I think their point here is that, like, the actual way that the Indian characters behave is different than the way the American characters do, and a lot of that is because their whole milieu is very different. Their whole Cape scene is very different. So yeah, cool. Obviously, like, the Yangban are this terribly abused cult, so they all behave differently too.
Yeah.
Finally, last answer, Wanson says, I cannot get the corpse of Eden out of my mind. A weird kind of forest made of limbs and faces and body parts, subtly shifting and twisting.
Yes. I love that. Yeah. That's one of those ones I never would have thought about that as a setting.
Right.
But I like that. So, Matt, do you have an answer for this that wasn't covered? Or maybe it was covered? Do you have a setting that you really love?
I think what I was thinking about last week was one of the answers that was given here, which was just Brockton Bay as a city.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I'm really, like, I just love so many of these answers is that people really narrow down into, like, particular rooms, and when you, like, it's just really good writing, because every one of these rooms, every one of these small settings has its own feeling with it.
Yeah,
like that's one of the things about writing that I don't think I talk enough about on the show, but it's one of my favorite things about writing, full stop, is that you can teleport a person to a place and bring the feeling of that place into that person's mind with like a kind of sharp immediacy that you just don't get anywhere else in any medium. And Wildbow does this over and over, to the point where, like, as I'm reading through these answers, I'm being yanked into these places in my mind. It's a really, really cool thing to think about. And it makes me wonder if maybe I haven't been paying enough attention to setting in the course of this show. And I definitely intend to think about it more, actually.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think that honestly ties into what my answer was going to be, which is what Sarah Penguin said, which is the Brockton Bay Wards,
mm-hmm.
Base,
mm-hmm.
like operational facility, place where they live. There is so much, emotion there, and like so much work around just the central idea of what it means to be a teenage superhero is shown just in the emotion of the setting and the feeling that setting creates in you. Like I just close my eyes and see it, it's kind of a mess because these kids, like, they're really busy and they're working really hard and they don't take that much care of it. But like, it's a mess in a way that, like, it's not just like they're slobs, or not all of them rather, but just that they're like, they don't have time to always pick up after themselves. They're busy. They're doing all these different things. It's like a mixture of just like trash and work stuff at the same time, like, it just, like, you can see it, and this, like, it has this very distinct feel to it to me.
Yeah.
that I just really love. Like I feel like when I think about what it's like to be a ward, the first thing that I do is imagine their living situation for some reason.
Sure.
And I think that does show the power of setting to really influence how you feel about characters and how you feel about themes and stuff like that. I think it is a very powerful device that authors have in their arsenal.
Yeah, right. I mean, I find myself lacking the language to really talk about it too much because I'm like, how does the Ward's HQ make you feel? And I'm like, you read it.
Yeah,
right?
Industrious, like complex and
right. Lots of
regiment
things.
And it's like lots of things.
Yeah, I know of no way of expressing it short of making you read that part.
Right.
So, yeah. All right. Yeah, awesome.
Thanks, guys. That was great answers.
Yeah. All right. So the discussion question for next week is so this is reflecting the kind of Cauldron-esque discussion above. What moral quandary in Parahumans stuck with you the most, and how do you think Wildbow constructs such fiendish situations?
Yeah. I like this question a lot because I think it's something that we've talked about a lot in Worm, and less so in this book because this book has kind of has intentionally not sought out those kind of things. It's a different kind of story,
right?
But I think there is still some stuff here to talk about as well.
Well, and usually these conversations tend to devolve into litigating whether the character did the right thing or the wrong thing. And like to me, I mean, that's fine. That's fine, and I do that too sometimes. But like the point of the question is, which one of these stuck with you the most? And if it stuck with you, it's probably because you couldn't quite convince yourself that one answer was better than the other or something like that, right?
Right.
I don't want to put words in people's mouths or whatever. Like if there's all kinds of reasons why something may have stuck with you.
Well, and how those situations are constructed in that way, right? Like a book could very easily give you the answer, right? I mean, like it constructs the situation and then solves it for you. It could do that, but this book doesn't. Neither of these books do that.
Yeah.
And how do they not do that in a way that is still interesting and engaging and ties into what the book is trying to say, I think is what we're circling around. So have fun with it.
Cool. And that's all we got for you this week on We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading.
You can reach out to us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or over at our Twitter account at gotwormpod. My personal Twitter is at scottdaily85 and Matt's is at mordinamail. You can follow us there and listen to us complain about Game of Thrones.
That's right. And if you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else that podcasts can be found.
And as always, you can find all the shows and all the content we do over at our website, doofmedia.com. That's where you can find Vow to View, Deep Impact, and the Doofcast, which this week, Matt, is going to be covering Season 1 of Avatar, The Last Airbender.
Awesome.
Pretty excited for that conversation. I hope everyone is too.
Yeah, we're going to be doing an Avatar kick for a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah. So, and if you like any of these shows, including Deep Impact, which is really, really excellent right now. They're getting to some of my favorite parts of the story.
I got to catch up. I'm so behind.
Yeah, you will. Consider donating to our Patreon account, patreon.com/doofmedia. You can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Supporting us on Patreon gives you tons of great bonuses like voting in our quarterly fan art and costume contests, Q&A sessions, access to live streams of our recording sessions, and our excellent Discord chat. One thing I don't know if we mention on here ever is that there are different reward tiers. Like one of them is if you donate above a certain level, you can basically make us do a Doofcast episode on whatever topic you choose within reason. And we've done a lot of those. That's a lot of what our shows are, actually.
That's why we're doing Avatar, actually.
Yeah, right. So if there's something that you want to hear us talk about, you can just go over and donate at that level and make that happen.
It's basically the make us watch anime hour.
That's what it ends up being, yeah.
But you know what? That's fine. I'll do it. I'll watch all the anime you guys want me to. I'm going to regret saying that. No, it doesn't mean I'm going to like it at all.
Yeah, right. That's a much higher reward level. And of course, this week, special thanks to new Bidoof, Adam P at the $1 level. Thanks so much, Adam. It's folks like you that make all this possible.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Appreciate that.
And of course, everybody, make sure you go over to Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/Wildbow, and donate to him as well. This is his world. We're just playing in it.
You know, we wrote that sentence like 2 years ago.
I know.
We're still saying it. It's cool.
I know.
I like that sentence.
Yeah, me too.
And if you can't afford to donate right now, that's absolutely okay, guys. There are tons of ways you can help us out. Share the podcast, retweet our tweets. That's helpful. And you can head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and a review. This week's Spotlight review comes from Torch Salesman, who gives us 5 stars and says, "This is the podcast that other literary analysis podcasts should strive to be." Oh gosh, that makes me nervous. I'm so glad that I discovered this when I first started reading Worm, because Matt and Scott's commentary is now, in my opinion, an absolutely integral part of experiencing the story. The chemistry between the hosts is fantastic. The commentary is informative, and frequently hilarious. And although the quality of the show took a major hit when we were no longer able to rely on Fugly Bob skits, rest in peace, my first thought after reading every new chapter is I can't wait to see how Scott and Matt react to this one. Without a doubt, my favorite podcast. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Jeez, that was so nice.
Wow.
Oh gosh, it's one of those ones where I don't know what to say. Thank you.
I'm glad we read these at the end of the show and not the beginning, because I would be all flustered if we read them at the beginning.
I know, I wouldn't be able to continue the show. Sorry about Fugly Bob, guys. I think Fugly Bob is a victim of a lot of things.
Yeah, I think we have a Fugly Bob's script, unproduced Fugly Bob script that's been sitting in a drive for like a year and a half now.
That's literally true. That is absolutely true. This is the problem with covering something live, is our production deadline is so tight that it just becomes impossible to do a lot of the bonus stuff that we did during Worm.
Yeah. Oh well, maybe we'll get back to it someday.
One day.
Yeah. Well, that's it for this week's show. Next week on the show, is Black over, do you think?
I don't know, Matt. I'm not in the prediction game anymore. I wrote on the script, "Let me flip a coin," and then I didn't get a coin. So I got to die. Let's do that.
I happen to have a poker chip, which is actually black, ironically.
Do it. Flip. Wait, does it have a clear head?
It's black.
Tails?
It says black. No, I mean, it's black on both sides, so it's definitely going to continue to be black.
Okay, well, there we go.
Yep.
We'll see you next week.